Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. Innistrad Midnight Hunt spoiler season has officially started. Well, okay, kind of. From the time that I'm recording this episode, there are just a few hours left until the official kickoff for this set. But we actually already have some exciting potential spoilers that have not yet been confirmed. And these spoilers look incredibly legit, so I'm pretty much just gonna say, yeah, these are 99.999% likely to be legitimate. Although these images might be somewhat grainy, and my apologies for that, these are the best images that I could find, they do look pretty real. And with these potential spoilers, we actually also got a potential new mechanic confirmed with Daybound and Nightbound. So what exactly does that mechanic do, and what are these spoilers? Well, I've already got my first cup of coffee in me today, so let's jump into it to find out. So first up, let's talk about that new mechanic, Daybound and Nightbound, and it looks like we actually have some day and night tokens that are going to be coming in draft and set boosters that can help us out. But I'm sure that you can also easily make your own tokens if you'd like to as well. You know, just draw like a sun and then maybe a moon. And there you go, you've got it. Regardless, these tokens describe exactly how this mechanic works, and let's start off on the day token. At the top it says, if it becomes day or night, or if a Daybound permanent enters the battlefield, track day-night for the rest of the game. So this is a mechanic like Ascend with the City's Blessing or Monarch that sticks around. If it ever becomes day or night, or if a Daybound permanent enters the battlefield, day and night need to be tracked for the rest of the game. Next up it says, as it becomes day, transform all Nightbound permanents. And if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn. Now that part definitely rings a bell, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but let's talk about night first. Night says, as it becomes night, transform all Daybound permanents. Permanents enter the battlefield Nightbound. And if a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn, it becomes day next turn. So basically, when it becomes night, all Daybound permanents transform, and then new permanents coming in that would have been Daybound come in as Nightbound. To swap from day to night, no spells need to be cast in a turn, and to swap from night to day, 2 spells need to be cast. And again, if that requirement is met, it swaps on the next turn. Now, as I said before, this mechanic does sound familiar because, well, we kind of had this already, but not as a defined mechanic, in a way. Now, if you've ever played with werewolf cards before, you know that they act in a similar way. Let's take a look at Huntmaster of the Fells. At the bottom of the card, it says at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Huntmaster of the Fells. It transforms, and the backside is Ravager of the Fells, which at the bottom of the card says at the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, transform Ravager of the Fells. So werewolf cards like these in the past have basically had their own kind of day-night requirements on the individual cards. There wasn't a global tracking of day or night. You might have some werewolves that have already transformed and are on the night side, but if you play a new card, well, then it's going to be on the day side. Cards like these never just enter the battlefield on the night side. Now, one thing to note, and one thing that I'm guessing that we're going to see in this set are transform triggers, which is why I specifically brought up Huntmaster of the Fells, which definitely has one. Huntmaster of the Fells has, whenever this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into Huntmaster of the Fells, put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield and you gain 2 life. And then Ravager of the Fells has, whenever this creature transforms into Ravager of the Fells, it deals 2 damage to target opponent and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature that player controls. So essentially, whenever this swaps between the day or night side, you're getting a different transform trigger. Again, this is just speculation, but I'm guessing we're going to see this in the new Daybound and Nightbound cards too. Not all of them, obviously, but in some of them. Regardless, now that we've talked about the mechanic, let's talk about an exciting potential spoiler that utilizes this mechanic. So let's talk about Arlen The Pax Hope. That's right, Arlen is back. Or should I say, potentially back. Again, these are potential spoilers. Regardless, Arlen is a planeswalker that starts off with 4 starting loyalty and costs 2 red-green. She has Daybound, so again, that mechanic that we just talked about, so start tracking your day and night cycles. Her +1 is until your next turn, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash, and each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then her -3 is create 2/2/2 green wolf creature tokens. Now, like cards in the past like Huntmaster of the Fells, you'll notice that there's a sun symbol in the top left. So obviously that indicates the day side of the card. And actually, before we talk about the night side of this card, one thing that I do want to bring up is I wonder if they're actually going to errata all of the old day-night werewolves to include Daybound and Nightbound so that they're all tracked together. That might get a little hairy because, again, they don't mention Daybound or Nightbound on the card, and normally, as of now, they would be tracked separately. And again, like I mentioned before, there is no way to just have a card come in Nightbound on those old cards, but if they change that, there would be, so I really don't know what they're going to do about that. We'll have to wait and see. I'm sure they're going to announce something today, hopefully on it. And yeah, it might get a little hairy regardless because having that same day-night symbol on those cards but not indicating Daybound or Nightbound can get confusing. Regardless, confusion aside, Arlen The Pax Hope does deal with day and night, so yeah, if a player doesn't cast any spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn. And when this does happen, this transforms into Arlen the Moon's Fury. So obviously this is the night side of the card, it has Nightbound on it, and you notice the moon in the top left. Her +2 is add red-green, and her 0 is until end of turn, Arlen the Moon's Fury becomes a 5/5 werewolf creature with trample, indestructible, and haste. Now this also might need to be something that needs to be clarified as well, but I'm wondering how its loyalty works. To my knowledge, this is the very first 2-sided card that has a planeswalker on both sides. So when Arlen transforms, does her loyalty go back to 4, or does it stay at whatever it was? My assumption is no, the loyalty would probably stay the same, but I could be wrong on that. Again, this is new territory. We have seen other 2-sided cards with a planeswalker on them, but those were different. For example, we've got Valki, Mila, and Rowan Scholar of Sparks. Each of these are MDFCs, so they don't transform, but they are cast on one side. And obviously, Valki and Mila are creatures on one side, and though Rowan is a planeswalker on both sides, again, it's an MDFC, so you're either casting that side or the other. So unlike Arlen, there's no transforming, and the backsides are completely different cards. Again, my assumption is that that loyalty does not reset every time that this flips from one side to the other, but again, I could be wrong. Regardless, yeah, this is a pretty effective planeswalker, either making you tokens or helping you cast things with flash, or, just adding mana to your mana pool, or becoming a creature that you can smack your opponents with. When it comes to decks that might play this, I think the most likely spot is probably a 5-color Super Friends deck like Essica. Or should I say the other side of the card, the Prismatic Bridge. The Prismatic Bridge says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card on the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Basically, keep getting planeswalkers off the top of your library into play for free. So yeah, in a 5-color Super Friends deck, she could fit right in. Obviously, the other place for this card would be a wolf or werewolf tribal deck, but we really don't have any of those at this point because there really haven't been any good werewolf commanders yet, though I am assuming that we're gonna be seeing one in this set. But for the time being, if you do have a Morph on the Boundless wolf or werewolf tribal deck, go for it. But aside from Arlen, we do have one more exciting spoiler to talk about in this episode, so let's move on to that. And that would be Saryth the Viper's Fang, and again, my apologies for the graininess on this card, it's the best that I could find. Anyways, Saryth the Viper's Fang is a 3/4 human warlock that costs 2 green. It has other tapped creatures you control with Death Touch, other untapped creatures you control have Hexproof, and by paying 1 and tapping it, untap another target creature or land you control. So our tapped creatures become deadlier, so obviously when we attack with any creature essentially, well the ones that don't have Vigilance, they're going to get Death Touch and they're going to be harder to block. And then other untapped creatures we control have Hexproof, so they're going to be safe from things like target removal. Of course, we can utilize Saryth to actually untap a creature if it's in danger to give it Hexproof. Or of course, we can untap creatures and lands for other reasons. So they deck built around this commander, let's talk about some cards that could be effective with it. Obviously, mana dorks that can generate you a lot of mana would love to be untapped so they can tap again. So first up, there's Llanowar Tribe, which can tap for green, green, green. In combination with this commander, instead of this tapping for 3 mana, which is already a lot, it's basically going to be tapping for 5. And then Karametra's Acolyte can obviously tap for even more, tapping to add an amount of green to your mana pool equal to your devotion to green. In a mono green deck, obviously that can get pretty high. Speaking of which, there's Circle of Dreams Druid, which can tap to add green for each creature you control. Now this is a newer card, but a decently expensive one already at around $10. But obviously in green, you've got plenty of great options for some effective mana dorks. But keep in mind that this commander can also untap lands, and okay, we're going to go through a couple of expensive lands that I just need to mention first, because if I don't mention them, someone's going to say in the comments, well, what about this one or that one? Yes, I know these cards exist, but they're expensive. Okay, here we go. And the first is obviously Gaia's Cradle, which is an incredibly expensive card. Yes, this would be effective with this commander. And then Growing Rights of Itlimoc basically turns into a Gaia's Cradle, Itlimoc Cradle of the Sun. This card isn't nearly as expensive as Gaia's Cradle, but yeah, it's still a $20 card. And then obviously you can use that on tap effect for some utility lands like Maze of Ith, which is a $10 card. But outside of these expensive lands, of course there are plenty of budget lands that can be very effective with this commander. For example, a land that can tap for multiple mana like Guildless Commons can be impactful. Next up, Helmut Ornreath the Vastwood, which enters the battlefield taps for a green, but it can also tap to put a ++1 counter on each green creature that enters the battlefield this turn. So by untapping this, we can do that twice, and again in a mono green deck, we're going to have plenty of green creatures to grow with this. Or how about Miko Koro, Center of the Sea, which can tap for a color, so we can pay 2 and tap it and each player draws a card. So again, whether we've got lands that tap for multiple mana or utility lands, this commander can really help out with those. With this deck, you're also probably going to want to consider some other untap effects like Seeker of Skybreak and Vitalize. Seeker of Skybreak can tap to untap target creature, and Vitalize untaps all creatures we control. Again, with our commander, by untapping any of our other creatures, they essentially gain hexproof. So it's a fantastic way to protect them in a lot of situations. And obviously then we can use their tap effects again. Now actually, one other card that I do want to bring up, and actually rules lawyers out there, please help me out in the comments below to let me know if this works, is Viridian Longbow. It's an equipment that gives equipped creature the ability to tap to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Now again, I think this works, but if it doesn't, my apologies, and again, rules lawyers, please help me out in the comments below. Basically though, by putting this on one of your creatures, when you tap them to ping another creature, I believe your creature would have Death Touch while doing that because it's going to be tapped when the damage is assigned, so the creature it pings is dead. Again, I think? I'm not sure exactly when it checks for that. Please let me know in the comments below. But of course, there are plenty of ways to play with that Death Touch as well and to make it very effective. Now, when it comes to being in the 99 of a deck, the first commander that came to mind is actually one of my newest personal commanders with Garth One-Eye. If you haven't seen that episode, make sure you check it out, and I won't spoil too much on what this deck actually wants to do, but there are plenty of ways in this deck to untap creatures, and lands even, so yeah, another effect like that can be great in it. Especially a creature that gives all my untapped creatures hexproof. There are plenty of ways to untap specific creatures or to untap my entire team, so an extra level of protection like that can be fantastic. And of course, just being able to untap Garth an extra time in a turn with Saryth can be huge. By tapping, Garth gives us access to either Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, or Black Lotus. So yeah, just untapping this can be a lot of extra value. Next up, another commander that might want to utilize Saryth in the 99 might be Samut, Voice of Dissent. First off, Samut has Vigilance, so basically she's always going to have hexproof as long as Saryth is in play. On top of that, Samut can also untap another target creature, so she can also basically give hexproof to something else. Another commander that might want to utilize this card in the 99 though is Marwyn the Nurturer. Marwyn can tap to add an amount of green equal to her power, so yeah, you can easily get her power up pretty high and she can tap for an absurd amount of mana. So having another way to protect her and also help her generate an absurd amount of mana can be great in this deck. And speaking of that, another commander that might want this for the exact same reason is Kydel, Chosen of Kruphix. This is a partner commander that can tap to add colors to your mana pool for each card you've drawn this turn. So maybe you draw some cards, tap this for a good amount of mana, untap it with Saryth, and then draw even more cards and then tap it again. Next up, one final commander that I'm going to bring up that might want to consider this is Vorel the Hulkblade. With Vorel, you can pay green-blue and tap it to double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact, creature, or land. Obviously, a way to protect this, and to do that again in a turn can be very impactful. Regardless, if you've got a commander deck that's got green and your commander taps for an effect, you might want to consider this. Saryth can help you protect your commander and give you that effect again. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.